All right, let's turn toward the president's trip to the Middle East, and specifically on Saudi Arabia. I want you to listen to what Senator Bernie Sanders said about the decision to visit the Saudi kingdom.
No, I don't think so. You have a leader of that country who was involved in the murder of a Washington Post journalist. I don't think that that type of government should be rewarded with a visit by the President of the United States.
What's your reaction in response to that?
The president believes that if you're going to make values and human rights the center of your foreign policy, which he does, the best way to advance those rights, to advance those values, protect and promote them, is to actually go overseas and talk to foreign leaders and be direct and candid and in the room. You can't say that values matter and then stay at home and refuse to talk to people or refuse to make the case. The president felt it was very important that in every stop on this trip, Victor, he talk about human rights, and he did. These are not easy conversations to have, but they're important to have if you're going to try to make a difference overseas.
Did the president directly bring up the Americans who were held in Saudi Arabia, who either imprisoned or not allowed to leave the country?
It all stops. The president has talked about wrongfully detained Americans, and that was no different on this trip at all.
So he did mention to the Crown Prince those Americans who are being held and not allowed to leave Saudi Arabia.
He talked to the prince about a range of our human rights concerns, including Americans that are wrongfully detained.
Okay, let me ask you about the fist bump, which the Washington Post, obviously Jamal Khashoggi was a columnist there, and they said it was shameful. Congressman Schiff, Democrats, said it, a fist bump worth 1,000 words. Once the White House decided that the president was going, of course there would be a public greeting of some sort. The Crown Prince would be at the meeting. What was considered? Were alternatives considered, or were you prepared for that moment and you're okay with what you saw?
Throughout this trip, Victor, as the president greeted leaders from all around the region, he greeted them all in different ways based on his personal relationships with them. Some of them he shook their hands, some of them he did fist bumps, including in Israel, the first stop. So it wasn't unusual for the president to kind of mix it up based on who he was meeting in the moment. He was much less worried about the greetings than he was about the meetings. And the meetings in Saudi Arabia were important to have, and they produce results, and they will probably produce results going forward in the future that are in the best interest of the American people. The president went on this trip because it was in the national interest that he do it, whether it was Israel or Bethlehem with President Abbas and the Palestinian Authority, and certainly in Saudi Arabia, meeting with 9 heads of state across the Gulf Cooperation Council. There was an awful lot on the agenda that we aren't talking about, and the president feels like those items on the agenda, they were important. The meetings were much more important than the greetings.
I understand that, John, but the greeting is important. The optics are important. You and I had this conversation when you were working here at CNN in 2018, and Donald Trump was meeting with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, and we talked about the importance of the optics and how those pictures speak without people going to read the columns on what was actually accomplished or not. So. Does this offer the Saudis the degree of potentially rehabilitation, the image alone that they'd hoped for?
There was no way that the president wasn't going to greet the Crown Prince, who was hosting on behalf of the King the Gulf Cooperation Council meeting, and was part of these bilateral discussions Friday night in Saudi Arabia. There was no way they weren't going to meet one another and have a greeting. It was a 1-second fist bump. The president moved on and was much more focused on what the agenda was in the room.
All right, let's move on and talk about Russia and Iran. President Putin leaving Russia, I believe for the first time since the invasion. He's going to be in Tehran. And we know that the White House says that Russian officials were there looking at some potential weapon-capable drones there. Your concerns about Iran's assistance and this meeting that's coming up?
Yeah, obviously it's concerning, and we wouldn't have put the information out in the public if we didn't believe that it's concerning, that Mr. Putin could be arming himself with some advanced drone capabilities that have actual kinetic effects. In other words, they can launch weapons and missiles and rockets from these drones and further prosecute the war in Ukraine, further cause death and destruction inside Ukraine. So of course it's concerning. But Victor, it's indicative of a couple of things. Number one, how much more isolated from the international community Iran is becoming. There's a deal on the table to deal with their nuclear ambitions. They need to take that deal. This is just another example of how they are continuing to isolate themselves from the international community. And two, it's indicative of Mr. Putin's efforts to try to replenish his weapons and capabilities and the trouble that he's having due to the sanctions, due to the export controls. He's having trouble with microelectronics in replenishing his precision-guided munitions and obviously his drone capability, so he's going now to Iran. So here you have, over the course of the last weekend, an interesting split screen. You got President Biden in the Middle East working for a better, integrated, more stable, more secure Middle East with multiple heads of states across the region, and you got Mr. Putin sidling up to the supreme leader in Iran to get some drones so that he can continue to kill more Ukrainians.